We are recording. All right. So I'm because I'm recording. I'm the host of this meeting. I'm Richard Nikoley, speaking to you from the Sierra Nevada mountains at exactly 4,200 feet elevation with lots of pine trees. I have with me a German and a Brit. Although the German, Moritz Bierling, is in San Francisco right now, which is like a 3-hour drive away from me. Andy is UK dude. You'll know when he starts talking. And the other thing is that this is like a completely serendipitous event. We just got on a Facebook Messenger chat and said, hey, let's do a 3-way video. And that's what we're doing within like an hour setup and everything. I guess I should mention that there's a mutual friend involved. This chick, Megan. And for some reason, she thought that, Richard, you need to be hooked up, or you need to be in communication with these smart dudes. And Moritz and Andy are amongst perhaps 4 to 5 that she's done that with. And she's batting 1,000. And so, Moritz, tell us about yourself.
Sure. What do you think would this audience like to know about me?
Well, everything. Well, just the standard.
Sure.
The standard.
I'll do my little shtick.
Elevator speech. Right? Elevator speech.
I'll do my little shtick.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm in San Francisco right now. That might betray my connectivity to a certain type of people in the world and the type of things that I care about. No, I'm here because I'm always traveling. I'm sort of living a semi-nomadic life or periodically nomadic life. And on those travels, on those exploits, I meet a lot of people. I meet a lot of organizations. I work with a lot of different companies. And so I'm in San Francisco right now, specifically in the States more generally, because for some reason in the summer of every year now, since last year, there's enough energy accumulating in this part of the world that it exerts a pull on me I can't resist. There are conferences, there are people, there are events, there are organizations that are doing interesting things. And that's sort of really the thing that I pay attention to, not because I care so much about interestingness as such, although that also is useful to pay attention to, but more because I look for, wherever I can find it, people, groups, technologies, philosophies, methodologies, practices, whatever it may be, that hold sort of some small piece of what I consider the puzzle that we need to put together in the right way so as to overcome the global challenges we have, not only on the collective level, but also on the individual level, and by way of going through the individual and then up the scale to the multi-individual of all scales, and then even the planet. And if we can manage this thing down here, maybe we can even permeate the universe and go out. So that's sort of my interest.
Andy.
I do all sorts of different business. I basically go around meeting different people, entering different fields, and finding individuals within that ambit of 400 tradesmen or 3,000 oil experts or whatever you're talking about, and create a connection with someone and usually invest in them, or they invest in me, time, money, energy, expertise. And I have lots of little ventures going around the world. I have a friend in India doing this, Australia doing this, and I try and bring them together. And on a different level to what Moritz is doing, he's saying, tackle world problems. I'm trying to bring people together so that they can basically look at the world in a completely different way to the way that when they met me, and they can come together and we can all, usual story, we can all benefit from each other and make some money on the way. And I'm in Putney, so I grew up in Wimbledon, southwest London. And I've moved towards the river because I've just decided to move towards the center. And yeah, at the moment I am working on buying a ship. So I'm looking into transporting things. I was thinking across the Atlantic, but actually it's looking like the Mediterranean. So I went to Menorca to see my friend. And the thing is, it's based in Barcelona. So I'm going to be flying to Barcelona probably next week. And I thought this was a perfect time to chat to you two and see what we could learn from each other.
Well, you know, I'm a former Navy ship driver, so if you need a captain, let me know. Right, I might just do it for fun. Right. But beyond that, Andy, I listen to that, and what pops into my mind is that we have this certain, and we talked the other night, right? And what I gleaned from you is that it almost doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree or agree or disagree or agree or disagree on this certain thing, because we tend to be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're dot connectors. You look out and like, what can I put together with this? What can I put together with this? And what synthesis can I make from that?
Yeah, I think what Stephen Fry said was he enjoys, with his friends, playing gracefully with ideas.
Yes.
And I think you play gracefully with ideas well. And when I watched Moritz, I listened to him first talk with Joel Davis, and I just thought, here's a guy who plays gracefully with ideas. And the way you move your hands, Moritz, when you talk and you build and you show and you pull down, it's like I've said to many people, so I'll say it on air, your thought process and your articulation of that thought process is more similar to mine, from my biased opinion, than anyone else I've ever met. So it's fascinating to see where that bias is and actually where I am exaggerating our similarities.
Okay, so now, Andy, I'm actually gonna, we put this together like very, very quickly, right? But you had, let me, here I am, my other screen here. You put out kind of a suggested outline for the speech, and in the time that we put
very succinct, wasn't it? It was almost bullet points. It was so precise.
I call it a stream of consciousness, right? It's like, and that's good. Because
I would call it a scream of consciousness.
I prefer Bath. I think Bath is the best, but there we go.
Yeah. But here's what I'd like you to do, and even though I'm the host of this and recording it, but you and I talked the other night, and it was partially about my deal with Moritz back a week ago, and I thought, well, I need to do the same sort of thing with you that I did with Moritz, right? And you said, well, how about the three of us get together? And then I guess you watched our gig another time and you created this thing. So I'm kind of going to, and this is perhaps a very bad thing for a host to do, but I'm actually want to turn it over to you to guide the conversation with Moritz. You and Moritz primarily, and let me know when you want to weigh in. Will that work for you?
Yeah, okay, I'll start from the end and work backwards, because that's what I do. Like in chess, you work from the checkmate and you work backwards.
Andy and I have played chess before, and but he's scared to do another game with me because he beat me the first time, and he's like, but I was not bad for not having played in 30 years. He's a master-rated player. Oh,
Richard is a trickster. He's a trickster. Okay, on to the topic. So a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what our circles talk about are the things that I say, like, politics, religion, group ethics, morality, all of these things are very, very interesting topics. But I wanted to start by maybe looking at this word that I keep repeating, which is tropoclastics. So tropo meaning change, basically how one changes one's habits. And I think this is as a center of conversation. It's something that you can always touch on the side, but if you have it as the locus of conversation, and I can explain some things I've been doing, and you, Richard, and you, Moritz, it's really interesting to see how we look at our own lives and how we go, okay, what I did is I tried this. And it can be in any sphere, because you realize they overlap. And when you start looking at the world from the perspective of someone who is this being, I don't want to get too deep and philosophical about it, that goes about these processes and seems to have some sort of ability to weave between them and through them, right, as well as learning, then actually you begin to see how so many of your processes are automated almost. And of course, you've got to look at a parallel. You've got to look at one side. You don't want to destroy that tendency, because it shortcuts everything. You know, so if you don't have to think about putting on your shoes or which hand to use to write, you're making your life easier. But by the same tune, there are so many tweaks you can make to improve along all levels again. And you don't know they're going to improve until you do them. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to sell the idea of people, just try and change your habits. And 80% of them, probably 85 to 90% of them, will fail. And you'll come back and go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But Moritz, anything that springs to mind from your side on that?
Sure. I think what you're pointing to is that the value of a lot of things doesn't lie in the thing itself, but in the connections that it has to other things and in the context from which it emerges. And so oftentimes people have the capacity to imagineer differences from where we're at currently, but then they have a difficulty bringing those differences or those different state of affairs in the world about. And so some people are very good at taking what is currently here and then imagining sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps out of where something could end up. But they often have difficulties bringing that about. And so this is sort of the whole reason for why we need to have collaboration and cooperation, because we have people have different capacities to think, to ideate, to connect, to sort of manifest, to move forward on something. And so I think the sort of smart people's disease that I see a lot of people around me having is knowing what that different things are possible, but then sort of being stuck with this, like just vomiting of this is what I want to see in the world, but then not making progress towards that. And I feel like a lot of that is partially due to, let's say, bad code, bad programming, and you can sort of interpret this word in the broadest possible way, like cultural code, parental code, genetic code, societal code, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. There are different dimensions, but when you basically what just happens throughout your life, you start out being born, your parents name you. By the way, that's a very interesting thing to me. People name you, so they're making a choice about the way that you show up to other people. So they're actually having a pretty large effect on your progression through life by giving you a moniker that you then use to introduce yourself in every single instance that you meet somebody. Think about that. Like they're basically determining a huge part of your life. And so actually just today I started thinking a lot about, with other friends, what my name means, or what our names mean, and what the name then has an effect on my life. So, for example, my name, Moritz, means Moorish, Moor, the black man, right? It's like the Nubians, the Egyptians. And so what does that mean? Does it mean the foreigner, maybe? Does it mean like the person that isn't integrated into Indo-European society because I am white after all? Or white, me being a very like modern category, but whatever. Anyway, there are many different directions I could take this, but let's just suffice it to say, there are things about your life that you don't determine that have an effect on you. And so that you could call code that you haven't written yourself. And so throughout the rest of your life, you will either figure out how that code has internal structure, whether it actually maps to external reality, and how functional it is. And then if you're lucky, you might be born into a privileged enough time slice, cultural context, parental home, whatever, that you can actually work through that code and arrive at sort of the root directory and like, oh, now I get it. And then like all things are open to you. But until you reach that point, you're pretty much determined at some basic level by other people's choices, and you're not really your own man or woman or whatever. So that's sort of what I would say to that.
Interesting. Richard?
Yeah. Moritz, I'm sorry. I'm Richard, and that like means king or something. But the other thing I would say, you know, it's very interesting. You go very, very deep and very fundamental. And I like that because so much of what we talk about all the time is these sets of assumptions, these paradigms that are built around culture and everything, right? Family, right? And I don't mean to say it's bad, but what I mean to say is that we don't really tend to analyze it. We don't tend to pull it apart, and that's kind of what we're doing here. And it's great that you do, right? So you can say, you know, I hadn't really ever considered that thing before, that, you know, your parents name you, and then you're stuck with it unless you're just silly, right? It's like, all right, you got a name, deal with it, right? So you get a good or better name. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. You know, I mean, some people go so far as to change it. I just wouldn't do that. It's like, to me, it's like, well, you're looking at the wrong thing, because what you should do is like, okay, this is who I am. This is part of my essential identity. But here's another thing. So, and I don't really mean to get into a rabbit hole about this, but another thing parents do is circumcise male boys. I'm circumcised, right? And I have no idea. My father is not, by the way. He's German. But I have no idea what it would be like. I would have rather, you know, like, heard all sides. Like, do I want to be intact? I know, chicks seem to like, it's more aesthetic for chicks, I think, a circumcised dick than not. But I've also heard from others that it feels better not. You know, I would have rather, you know, been able to see those arguments. And I don't mean to get into a rabbit hole, but what I'm getting at is that you're talking about really base fundamental stuff that begins to form your view of how the world works, right?
Can I make a comment on that, Richard? Which is,
yes.
Sorry, it's just something that sprung to mind about it's not about circumcision, but it's about the concept of the thousands of times that I have heard or said words to the effect of, "Oh my God, I couldn't live like that." You talk about an experience, you say, like, "You're circumcised, I'm not, fine." And I think, wow, God, a life of being circumcised. And you think it would be so very different. And of course it would. But, you know, when we get into conversations with people and, you know, they say, "Oh, I live in Namibia and I live in a tree." Like my cousin, you know, lives in a tree house in Peru, actually. He's built himself a house. And I think, I say to him, I could never live like that and things like this. And then you go and visit and then you think, hold on a minute. And the point I'm making here is that time and time again, we look at a life that is ostensibly similar to our own with one difference, you know, circumcised, uncircumcised, living in London, living in Paris, whatever. And we often overvalue, we can often undervalue, but we mostly overvalue firstly, how we'll cope with it. And secondly, how accurate we are about how different it'll be. So let me reiterate. So we tend to think that we'll adapt much worse than we do to change. You know, "Oh, I could never do that. Oh, I don't know how you got through the death of your family. I could never manage that." And it's like, well, no, you could. And I'm not just saying these points sort of off hat. I'm saying that feeds really into all sorts of things like scientific investigation. I always say the phrase, "You can't measure a foregone loss." And for some reason, people keep asking me and say, "What do you mean by that?" And it's very simple. If you say, I don't know, not to get on economics, but if you say, I don't know, the price level, whatever that is, in Keynesian terms is X, and then a year later the price level is, you know, X plus 7%, and you go, oh, well, you know, the price has increased by 7%. You don't know what that increase would have been.
You don't know.
You don't know. You're just going on. Anyway, so that's one of a billion examples. So what I'm trying to say is in these processes of building a paradigm, let's say we've got this paradigm here. Let's talk about circumcision. Let's talk about saving the whales. But let's talk about it within these bounds. We've got to realize that when we're projecting and saying, oh, what I want to do, you know, you get this with the climate change things. They say, almost every projection is completely wrong. And it doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I think all of this, I'm really tentative when I talk about trying to solve the world's problems, because it's a noble aim, but I'm fascinated with what Moritz can do. I think Moritz, for example, your toe dipping into technology and your understanding of blockchain and all that stuff, that technology itself will, I don't want to say it will change the world, but it has the capacity to change communication, trade, and all sorts of other things, lower cost, let's say, as well as everything else, in manners that we can't even imagine. But whilst imagining all that, let's not project 10 years ahead and have a conversation of, oh, this is what will happen here, and of course this will lead to this. Do you see what I mean? So I'm very tentative about talking about the future and saying, well, of course this will happen here, and we're getting stupider, so we need this. So I'm more about now, and how can we solve these now?
Let me interject for just a second and ask you a question. I want to ask you a particular question, Andy Curzon. When is it that you absolutely know that you're right about something?
Okay, well, I mean, if you're getting, I try and put it away from deeply philosophical, but I'm kind of critical rationalist in that term, in terms of we can't be certain of anything, and knowledge is an illusion to a certain extent. I think I'm
asking about the one time you could actually be completely certain you're right.
I don't think you can.
No, it's easy.
Do you remember when you said to me,
it's when you know that you're wrong.
But no, but Richard, as clever as that is, unfortunately that's wrong as well, because you think you know you're wrong. It's sort of like, I had an IQ. Have you done Raven's matrices before?
No.
Okay,
I do IQ tests. I test.
Okay. Well, anyway, the point is not about the IQ test. It's about the abstraction from it, which is.
Guys, you're engaging in linguistic confusion here.
All right, go, Moritz.
Okay. No. Let me be clear about this. So, you've got. With the Raven's matrices, you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4. What's the fifth one? Is it A, B, C, D, or E? And it's pattern recognition.
Yes.
And when the questions get harder, so higher IQ, harder ones, the answer is quite elusive, and you eventually get to it, and that's fine. But when the questions are easy, I actually spend so long thinking about them that you can find a logical pathway why all of the answers are correct. It's just, let's say A is the simply correct answer and B is just nothing like it. To get to B, to put B in there, to fit within that pattern requires a huge amount of just melding and framing and reframing. But I can do it, and I can explain it. Even if you gave me one, I could explain it. And what I'm trying to say there is, as much as you think you know that you're wrong about something, and falsification and all that, you could always be wrong. So yeah, you can never know you're right, in my opinion.
Well, that's what I meant. That's what I meant, is that I have this saying that and I want to say this, and thanks for interrupting, Moritz, and stopping us from going into like crazy shit. But what the reason I asked that question is because in just my line of dealing with people for so very long, I mean, 30 years on the internet, right? And everybody is right. This is what's right, and da-da-da-da. And I've always been a Popperian, falsifier kind of dude, right? And because it's easy, right? It's like, okay, falsified, dismissed. And
like when you said you were, what was it? You know for a fact I haven't been a grandmaster at chess.
What's that? Well, that is because you spun it as that you were like a what's his name? I've actually met with
Tim
him.
Ferriss. You're going to say Tim Ferriss, are you?
Tim Ferriss, a parlor trick sort of dude, right?
No,
And
no, no.
yeah, and that's what I thought you were talking about because I know Tim, right? I know, I like him. I've met him in real life a couple times and everything, but
the thing about Tim, I think
he's not my sort of dude. I don't like that sort of. It's like a building of. It's a building of, oh, you can do this, where I am like, no, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, right? So I'm more of a via negativity sort of guy because I trust human just wherewithal. Right.
So there's a point on Tim Ferriss here. Sorry, just so the way I see Tim Ferriss. Sorry, Moritz, and everyone listening, if you don't know Tim Ferriss, the way I see him is he teaches people to become very, very good at things they want to become very good at.
Yes.
So people say, I'm a good cricketer. I want to get the England team. He devises strategies for them to max out in their given field. And what I find is, I call it an occupational hazard. So if you are a dancer, your occupational hazard might be that you're sensitive to certain things that non-dancers are to, or if you're a coder, you might be sensitive. Do you know what I mean? It's like the occupational hazard of a lawyer is usually that they just become incredible liars, but liars in a sort of tricksy way. You can't have a decent conversation with a very good lawyer who's
we still have to talk about the truth versus honesty.
Okay, we'll do that, truth versus honesty. But I'm just making the point about Tim Ferriss, which feeds into what Moritz was talking about with Joel Davis, which is,
right.
I think Tim Ferriss is a great guy. He's smart, but he suffers from the occupational hazard of the target achiever. I call it, my ex-girlfriend was a target achiever. She have a target, achieve. And if you mention something that was outside the bounds of her achievement, so I said, oh, how about this amazing thing here? She'd go, you could see her mind ticking on, does this compute with my target? No, boom. And it was a smart move to get her achievements, to get her targets achieved, just like Tim Ferriss. But the reward.
Well, he made books of it. That's great.
As you know, as you said, Moritz, the reward is in the process, and you need to engage with the process, not sort of have the back of your mind going, hey, this is the process. The front of my mind needs to get the result, because the result is only it's only a flag to wave at the end. And I think what you were saying, Moritz, with Joel, maybe you can continue here, was
yes,
like that integration with the process is so much more important. You were relating it, Moritz, to when religions start, and when people have an amazing experience, they come back and they share it with people who didn't go through that experience. And I really wanted to consider that outside the bounds of religion and in terms of life as well. What did you think about that?
Sure. I think once you get an understanding of how much language is something we not only consume but also create, and how every single word and how every single exclamation and intonation and gesture and performance is something that somebody somewhere sometime came up with for the first time, you realize that it is performative. It serves a purpose. It doesn't have independent existence from the person who is authoring or performing it. So what a lot of people get stuck with is assigning meaning to words that they posit as being fixed and as being constant, which is valuable to do so that you can actually hold complexity in a finite set of terms or sort of descriptors or containers. And that allows you to then wield a lot of conceptual power that can move a lot of levers in the real world if you know how to manipulate that well. But ultimately, language is something we make up, we play with, we change over time, and we need to find a relationship with that is neither sort of childish nor sort of disingenuous. And I think we need to take language much, much, much more seriously while also taking it much more playfully. And so when religious leaders or when gurus or CEOs or storytellers or a Joe Rogan come up with some new idea or some new frame or some new performance or some new term, what they're doing is they're performing a newness, a novelty, and they're seeing whether it will stick, right? That's what comedians do, or what shamans also do. Like they go off, they desync from the collective, they sort of separate themselves, go off, like let the sort of turbulence in themselves generate some newness from the experiences and perspectives they have while being off to the side, being away from the group. And then they bring that newly created thing back to the group, and they see whether the group can whether there's a sort of a receptive docking station for the newness to actually come in, or whether they need to create some new piece that bridges that newness into the existing collective. And so when you talk about like having people come up with a religion or come up with a system or with a methodology, that by itself doesn't have any value whatsoever unless it gets used to some end. And I think what you're pointing to with the target goal, like target acquisition, like this sort of type of thinking, the danger with that is exactly as you described. It's that you close your ontology and you only pay attention to the things that fit your current focus. And so you're literally like a robot just executing a path towards something while blending out everything else. That's not a bad thing necessarily. It allows you to make very quick, very fast, very powerful progress towards something, because you're simply reducing the complexity to something you can manage and something that can generate momentum in you. But what you're also doing is you're leaving out all the complexity that is coming at you every single day that might actually change your goal to actually achieve or to sort of be more generative than the goal that you've currently chosen. And so when you have too long a cycle between opening a goal or a loop that you want to achieve and the closing of it, the world and you might have already shifted significantly enough that you've actually could have achieved more or gotten closer to what you think you want to get closer to than you originally thought. And so a lot of the sort of value that has been unlocked in the recent years in, for example, the startup world comes from bringing down the scope of visions into like the day or the task or the meeting, going through a cycle, doing a quick reflection, and then going through another cycle, doing quick reflection, going through another cycle. And so you can increase the throughput, you can increase the cycles, and by stringing together a lot of different cycles, you can end up somewhere very, very, very powerful without having to have the large vision that guides your every single move. And I think that's also what you're talking about with tropoclastics, that you have habits that might sustain you, that are actually reducing complexity, that are regularizing your life so that you can actually perceive differences within the containers of that regularity, and then spot the novelty, the thing you want to be paying attention to that you would otherwise not spot. And then based on that, change your progression and very, very quickly sort of have what I recently, just this morning saw on Twitter described as Meti, or in German, Fingerspitzengefühl, which means sort of to like, when, for example, John Boyd used this term a lot, Fingerspitzengefühl, which is basically when you're flying, for example, and you're like very slightly changing the trajectory, like just with the tips of your fingers, and sort of moving the scales just that little bit that you can't actually rationalize or can't actually describe, but that you know is valuable to do because you have such an intimately connected relationship to the tools, the people, and the systems that you are situated within, that they literally become extensions of yourself and allow you to reach much further, but not through the dialectical mind, but just through the sort of intuitive feeling into what's possible.
Yeah, I would relate that to, I just thought of myself playing pool. I went to, as in snooker pool, I went to see a friend of mine today down the road, and we went to a pub and we played a game of pool. And I sort of fly around the table potting balls. You know, I just sort of run around because I've been playing since I was 3 or 4. And he just went, hold on a minute, mate. He used to run pubs, and he said, hold on a minute, what are you doing? And he said, it's interesting how when I first watch you, it seems like you're just running around the table being an idiot or being a bit arrogant or something. But the more I watch, the more I realize, like, you're almost trying, this is what he said to me, you're almost trying not to think. And he said, why? What are you doing? And I said, that's exactly what I'm doing. you know, I've played this so much. I've got such an understanding that, you know, you hit a ball at the bottom, you hit the bottom, top, left or right, you hit at a certain pace and you hit at a certain angle. And that's the game. But the complexities around that, all of those things I do, when I look at a table and you've got 7 balls left and I go, okay, I'm going to do, and if I miss that there, I'm going to, I do that in about a second when I look at a table, maybe 2 seconds. And if I slow that down to try and explain that and to try and take it apart, I don't know what it is. It jumbles the mind. And how that relates to what you're saying, it's almost like the mastery of something. It really fascinates me how people, this is to slightly go off topic, but it's an interesting one, which is how people eschew, they push away so much stuff which is so close to what they do and would help them with what they do and other things so much because it's not within their preferred tribe of mastery. I'm talking here specifically. So, you know, they're going to be experts at C, but they won't touch Python, or they're experts at, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, table tennis, but they won't touch squash or whatever it is. And I look at this and I think it's such an interesting thing because I'm the kind of guy who tries a huge, huge amount of things. And like at school, I've said this online before. I played rugby, I was in the rugby team. I was captain of athletics. I did chess and all these sorts of other things. But was I a rugger bugger, as you call them in England? No. Was I a chess geek? No. Was I a computer programmer guy who never left the computer? For a little bit, but not really. You know, so what I tried to do was beat the rule of what do you call it? Master of none. What's it called? You know what I mean? What's it called? My brain has gone completely blank. Thinking of, oh, you know what it is. When you do a lot of things, you're only good at none. Sorry?
Jack of all trades, master.
Yeah, exactly. It just exited my mind. So I was trying to see if, because I grew up really admiring Leo da Vinci, and I thought, how can one man be so good at so many things, you know? And so I thought, I don't think it's just him, and I don't think it's just me. I think people cut themselves off from so much in their life. And this is my theory of openness, right? Just why does openness link so strongly with IQ? And I think it's almost like an offshoot of it. So IQ, you know, let's take IQ as almost like a capacity to abstract, but it's a bit more complicated than that, or the G. So what I see is openness as a trait is actually almost an ingredient result of IQ. And this is along many pathways. I'm talking along one pathway. And what I mean by this, I've seen some very smart people who shut themselves off from huge amounts of learning in their early years. And they come out as a 25, 30-year-old, and they are basically unwise people. And I'm trying to put this together and think, hold on a minute, what's going on? And all Jordan Peterson says, and I think what it is this. When we're in conversation, I look at people's attention above everything. When I talked to you, Richard, the other day, you listened to me for an hour and 6 minutes or whatever it was, however long it was. You didn't float off in your own world. Anyway, that's my belief.
No way.
And if you did...
Hey, let me cut in just for a second. Can
I?
Go
on.
Yeah. It was quite astounding. It was very, you know, this it's in itself is serendipitous. But even more so, you know, I got up one night, I couldn't sleep, like a few weeks ago. This is how, and this kind of, I'm just trying to perhaps weave together what Moritz and Andy are saying about the human experience and, you know, how it's different if you're really into your intellectual being and whatever. So anyway, I get up a couple weeks ago. It's 2 a.m. right? I couldn't sleep. Anyway, I go down. I had happened to had engaged with Andy in, you know, some sort of a comment thing on Facebook, and I dissed him about his chess ability, and because I got it wrong, and we worked that out. I thought he was being the Tim Ferriss thing, like we talked about before, but and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. my time, And within half an hour, we're playing a game of chess, which lasted to about noon the next day. He beat me. He beat me, right? No, I did go to bed, and got up, and then we continued it. I don't know. I think it was like 18, 19 moves, something like that, Andy. But anyway, what I'm saying is that it is remarkable that humans seem to gravitate together. And this is one thing that we might want to look at. And this is what Moritz is working on. And I think it's what Andy works on in terms of, like, we have the social thing that is in so many ways dysgenic and anti-civilization in the way it's working with big corporations controlling everything and so on and so forth. But the cat is out of the bag. Sure, I could go down the street. I could probably, I have friends here. I'm in the mountains. It's a town of 2,500 people or so. I could go down. I have friends. I have like hot chicks who clean my place when I need it cleaned. But if I want that true intellectual thing like we're doing right here, Moritz is German. Andy is UK. And we're on the internet and I'm recording it and everybody can see it. This is something that the anti-civilization crowd, the world, the swarms of dysgenic immigration and everything, they are going to lose. All right, I'm going to give it up there. Who's next?
Moritz, I think that is a topic I am not au fait with, because whenever it comes to talk of anti-civilization, I feel like I'm a duck out of water. I feel like I'm not experienced or smart enough to dissect it. So have a go.
All right, you guys are lobbing bombs at me, huh?
Yes.
Well, I don't know that I would sort of follow Richard's steps that he just took, but I think what you're pointing to is that there are different orientations in people, and that I don't think that those different orientations fall along racial lines or along cultural lines or anything like that. I think they fall along sort of somewhat luck, somewhat, I don't know, destiny of having been subjected to differential trauma loads through the environments that you grew up in. Just like an animal, for example, grows up in a particular type of an ecological niche, and then either that niche changes more than the animal is adapted to sort of absorb within its own genetic and phenotypic code, or it actually exceeds that, and then the animal doesn't know how to respond to the changes in the environment, and it just sort of tries a lot of things. If it succeeds, if it has enough plasticity in its own individual organism to overcome the changes, or it breaks. And if it breaks, then either it turns on itself, it commits suicide, or it plays out a script that it has in itself, but that isn't functional anymore, and it just sort of continues to spiral to death. Or it breaks and it turns on other organisms, either of its own kind or of other kinds, because it has to acquire energy to survive. And so when you don't do that, you die. And so I think the same thing applies to humans. If you want to sort of translate the ecological or biological language into something that humans could connect to, we exist all as agents in arenas. And the beautiful thing about us as humans is that we are not necessarily just one type of agent, but we can be many different types of agents in many different kinds of arenas simultaneously. And so when I enter a particular social context, or a particular city, or a particular, architecture, that's a sort of arena that affords a certain way of interacting with the environment around me, that assigns me or tries to assign me certain roles or identities that allow me to show up to this place in a predictable manner. And then if I am capable of sort of maintaining my own sovereignty over and above the strictures and structures around me, I am able to sort of be the magician, be the trickster, be the person that enters the arena, understands the complexities at play in it, and then
the magician.
yeah, exactly, reweave them to my ends, or to the ends that I have as my ultimate concerns that might not necessarily be me. So what I'm saying here is there are pressures on people. People can have the capacity to respond to those pressures. They can break. If they break, they turn on others or on themselves. If they don't break, they change. They internally self-complexify, or they actually externalize the pressure. And this is where actual human connection can come in and be a real force for good, where if you build up a trust relationship with somebody, what you're saying is, I will carry some of your cross with you. I am happy to like be there when you like take a couple steps too quickly and you fall, and I'll catch you. And then the pressure that you are subjected to sort of gets aikidoed towards me. And so people who already exist at a higher level of functioning, who are capable people, sovereign people, if you will, at least over their own lives, they can act as sort of absorbing barriers to the pressures of the environment around and among and upon the people in their circle of influence. And so that's sort of, I think, a goal for everybody to have as a worthwhile thing to work towards, that you yourself become so capable that you can become somebody who helps other people take steps in the same direction and of becoming a capable person themselves. And so that's really like, that's what I do. That's what I care about. That's what I want to bring to more people. It's this idea of, I am a meta missionary. I convert people to their own cause. And not only that, once they're converted and once they have the capacity to actually act out their cause, they can then choose a new cause to actually sort of choose it after the singularity point of having really rolled back their own life up until the point of the name that their parents chose for them, which sort of defines their mission to some degree. And then choosing, okay, now I name myself anew and I pick a new cause to sort of move towards. But that really takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to get to that point. And so some people are more fortunate of being born into a place, a time, etc., that they can actually work through that trauma. They can actually clear the stack, and they can then, with sort of this dynamo now running on empty, not having to chew through all the impurities in their being, can now choose a directionality and sort of just make progress towards something, and actually generate so much power momentum that it pulls other people in its wake.
Yeah, so I think what you just
Ari,
did there,
Andy,
what I think Moritz just did there, to me anyway,
I want to shoot you off on something, because please, right? Because
can I just reply to Moritz before we move on? One sec.
Well, I think, okay, go ahead.
What I think Moritz just did was he described what his mission or what he's doing that we did at the beginning in a better way just then, and I'm going to do it for me, which is what I try and do, or my meta mission at the moment, as it were, is to bring together everything I think I've learned, as it were, and that kind of culminates in one major thing, because obviously I've learned a lot of things, but most of them other people know or are better than me at. And I think that the slice with which I don't think that's the case with is profiling. And so what I think, the reason why I say profiling is because I think people talk about, paradigms and processes and project management and improvement and trade. And I think a lot of people don't realize how easy life is when you have a network of 50 to 300 people. I'm trying to build this network personally of people who have specialists, who have connections in different areas and expertise in different areas.
Right.
But you can't just meet someone and know all of this. You have to dig. And this is where I go back to what I was saying before about the correlation between IQ and openness. If I speak to someone, what I'm doing initially, you can know this, anyone who meets me can know this. A part of my brain is saying, what are your limits? And my first port of call is, what do you lose attention to? So when I'm talking to you, what is the point at which you give me what's called the glazed eye? Your eye just goes, and that for me is, if I have a chat with you for an hour, Rich, or with you, Moritz, whatever, and I see a lot of, let's say I don't see a lot of glazed eyes, I'm going to push further, get more complex. And what I'm really doing is I'm saying, how much use can you be to me from a sales point of view? How much use can you be to yourself? And what are we working with here? And I think that singular thing is almost my mission, to get people to realize how much they can get out of other people.
Can I interject now? Can I interject? All right. So when Maurice was talking, it actually turned my eyes to the notes you wrote beforehand. And this is why I wanted to set you off on this, because to me, what Moritz was talking about was, it's values, hierarchies of values, structures of values, different inclination, however you network values. I mean, I'll go back to Ayn Rand's. I like her definition of values the best: that which someone seeks to gain or keep. It's that simple, right? So we're always seeking values selfishly for us, right? And it always, actually, you get more values for yourself if you are reciprocal in trade and exchange with other people on many different levels, whether it be, it's love, it's just pure business, it could be anything like that. But anyway, Andy, here's what I want. You and I and Moritz are very all familiar with Kurt Doolittle and proprietarianism. And you wrote here right at the beginning, like, Kurt rejects value arguments. And I want you to talk about that.
Oh, really?
That struck out like a sore thumb.
Okay, all right. Well,
I want him to talk about it. So
I'll do a quick profile on Kurt then. And I have to do the profile through my experience of him. I met him on a bus on the way to PFS. So I flew into into Bodrum, the old Halicarnassus. And I got a mini bus from the airport, which is very small, to the Carrier Princess Hotel, which is Hoppe's wife's, Gulchen's hotel, which is this conference called PFS, and Hoppe hosts it. On the way, my sister was in the minivan too, and Kurt was talking to someone in front of me, like leaning over, talking a bit, and they were having an interesting conversation. And it just struck me immediately. I was like, this guy, I was like, either everyone at this conference is a genius, or there's something about this guy that I like. So I kind of just sort of snuck on in there, and I said something. And I think he got the same vibe with me in a completely different way. And we were kind of feeling each other out. And he noticed that after every speaker at PFS, I would go and shake their hand, and I'd invite them to lunch. I did it with every speaker, and he was the only person at the whole conference who noticed that pattern. And I thought, interesting. So here's a guy who and I learned he got an art degree. He was a coder. Above all, he's a marketer. Yes. He's very good at putting things together, but there seems to be
friend of Bill Gates.
So yeah, I did all of these things, and I thought, hold on a minute, but there are gaps. Let's prod for gaps. Let's try and work out, like, with the balloon, which is most susceptible to, let's say, emotion to begin with. So almost like the more hyper-masculine a brain is, it's kind of like Megan. Megan's got quite a masculine brain for a girl. If you get her riled, if she becomes emotional, you know that something's gone wrong in her head. So that you've got to qualify that. And with Kurt, if Kurt ever responds,
talking about Megan, well,
no, let's not go to Megan.
Megan hates my emotion. See, so maybe
hold on. Let's not go to Megan, but let's stick on Kurt. So,
all right.
So what I realized was, I talked to Kurt, and one of the guys speaking was called Dr. Richard Lynn, and he's probably the leading one or two people in the world of IQ. I was very interested in IQ, and I was very skeptical of IQ when I was, in 2012. And So I said to Richard, will you have lunch with me? And so I had lunch with him and his wife, but we ended up on a table of 12. Usually their tables are 3 or 4. And I didn't really mean that, but Kurt insisted on sitting next to me. And I wanted to talk to Richard. And then his wife wanted to talk to him. Anyway, there was a table of 12. We ended up having a really incredible conversation about IQ and abilities and where basically the bounds of it, where people overvalue, undervalue. And at the end of the conversation, Kurt said to me, I've got an IQ of 155 and I think yours is higher. I want to know how much higher. What's your IQ? Maybe words to that effect. And I said, blah, blah, blah. And we had a conversation. And I think what happened from there is we got a friendship because I knew him face to face. Then we became friends online.
Yeah. Wow.
And then what happened is almost everyone I knew when I became friends with him started saying, who the hell is this Doolittle guy?
So you didn't get
this anyway, so now I'll get to the profiling point. So years passed, we did a huge amount of favors for each other. I ran a conference, he gave me money, I gave him money. We basically traded a lot of time, expertise, and attention to each other. It was almost like we were two parts to a puzzle. That's how it felt like to me. And then we got to a point where he would disagree with me very openly about certain things, and he would edify me, and I would disagree, and then we would work it out. But then I suddenly struck on a fact. I thought, what Kurt's doing is he's building enemies. He's not enemies as people. What he does is he'll say, here's my idea. Here's the opposing idea. I must kill that idea. It's a marketing ploy. So what I thought is he's undergoing the occupational hazard of a marketeer. So a marketeer will say, my aim is to get my information out to as many people as possible and get as much as I can from it. And that being his aim of proprietarianism, I'm going a bit deep here, sorry, but give me a minute. So that being his aim of proprietarianism, a great tactic is to build up your enemy and to shoot them down. So first he did it with Rothbard, then he did it with libertarianism generally, then he did the process, and then it was feminism, and now it's, so all of these things I kind of was on board with, and I called myself a bound setter. So whenever he stepped over the mark, I'd be like, no, Kurt, come on, you're calling feminists this or whatever it is. But then he started to attack value itself. He started to say, and I know he was partly joking, I know he was, but he was basically saying define value and this, and he was taking the piss. And what he did, he stood on the fence. So his defense mechanism to me, I knew it already, was if I was to say, Kurt, don't be silly, he'd go, no, I'm only joking. And I thought, that's quite a cheap trick for someone so smart. So anyway, to encapsulate it in a sentence.
You're very, Andy, I think
you've got a gap.
Okay,
sorry.
give me a second just to interject, and then you continue. But I have to say, at first I was a bit skeptical about your ideas of like profiling people. I'm like, what's the point? It's like, to me, they're of value to me or they're not. If they're not, you're dismissed, right? And now I'm getting to see this. This is really good. That you are you're really trying to figure out people. I don't know really if it's worth it for me, if it's a value to me, to get back to that topic, value to me. But I just wanted to interject because I'm like, it's very interesting to me as you're describing Kurt, but to me, as you say, oh, he's doing this, or maybe he's doing it this way or this way, it all rings true to me. And that's why I interjected, because it's like, okay, you're going to profile, but seems to me you're quite accurate. And that doesn't mean Kurt is good or bad, or anyone is good or bad. But it's kind of a cool thing you do. So go ahead. Continue.
Well, I could take you off point and bring you back very quickly. So you just spoke for about 35, 40 seconds, and I looked at your submodal action cues. You're pointing, you're pausing, and when you said to me, you were saying a sentence, you were building it up, and then your brain said something like, oh, this is what I'm about to say, but I need to let him know that this isn't a fact. This is sort of the position I'm in. And your eyes closed, and your eyes closed a bit, and your left eyebrow went up, and you went, to me. And that was very much, I just projected that thought process in your mind, but I'm telling you that happened, and you know it happened too. And I only know that because I've watched people and tiny motions tens of thousands of times, and all of our micro emotions are the same, and very nearly the same. So when you say to me, I almost laughed. You said, would it be worth me, or it would be a benefit or value to me to do this? Immeasurably. Anyway, so that's that. But so to finish off with Kurt, I thought, I'm trying to get to the point, because Kurt came to Vauxhall in London and he stayed at a hotel and I used to go and meet him. And I was trying to understand, I was trying to put it all together. And I think with Kurt, he's got a few really, really big things that people aren't quite aware of. Like his knowledge of art and history of art is unbelievable. So when people start thinking he's a coder, he's like, no, his knowledge of art is incredible. His knowledge of cars is incredible. When he talks about things he knows, I know. And when he starts talking about like law, he, in the nicest possible way, he's not very well versed on law. Because whenever he starts bringing up topics of law, and he talked to some people about it, he said he muddled himself up in knots and then changed the subject. And I think with Kurt, when he starts going, and then moves on, he's got a few ticks, and you've got to work out whether is that tick his mind being too fast for his words. I think your mind is very fast, Richard, and your words, sometimes your words catch up with your mind in a different way to Kurt. And I think what I'm trying to say is I think Kurt is very complicated, but when you've got a few snippets of his life understood about how he was brought up with his family and his father. I'm not going to go into the private bits, but he is not someone who is, in some sense, he's not as stupid as he seems, but in other senses, he's not as clever as he seems. You know, what I'm trying to say is when you see something that Kurt writes that you go, wow, that is profound. It's probably not as profound as you think it is. And when you see something that Kurt writes that is, you think, what a stupid comment. It's probably not as stupid as you think it is.
Well, you know, I don't want this to be a Kurt diss thing.
Well, I can add something to this.
Here's the thing. I'm going to say a short bit and then hand it over to Moritz. But I like Kurt a lot. I have 2 interviews on my on freetheanimal.com, you know, with him. We talked first about epistemology, and then we talked about eugenia and dysgenia.
Epistemology. Sorry, just saying, the way you said epistemology showed me that you were not as interested in the word epistemology. Do you see what I'm saying? I listened to the prosody of your voice. Anyway, carry on.
No, I've been a big fan. You know, in fact, my go-to book for, I'm actually very interested in epistemology is like, how do you know what you know? Or, you know, that sort of thing. And I'm a Hegelian dialectic. But my favorite book on epistemology is Ayn Rand's the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, because it's rather mathematical in its structure, which I like, and so it's just enough for me. I don't need to be like a big student. I'm like but what I was going to say is in terms of Kurt and proprietarianism, since we're both familiar, we're all familiar with it, is that I really dislike, well, I'll just say it politely, the do nothing following of his. And I think it's probably pretty much 100% of do nothing males. You know, I use the term mommy's basement dwelling, gaming,
Jepsen, basically, yeah.
Pepsi sicking, wanker, bedwetters. And that's all I see in his following. I mean, they spend all their day, you know, typing, you know, arguing like minuscule little points. And I know it. When I was young, when I was a like objectivist fan, I was never a true maybe if you wouldn't use that language, they would be more apparent to you. Yeah, well, Moritz, like, I know, we're different in that way. I wouldn't.
No, hold on. I'm not cutting you down. I'm saying that the people that you see discussing on Facebook are not the people who are out there doing stuff. For the simple reason that the people out there doing stuff, they don't need to be on Facebook to demonstrate that this is right. So when you go to Facebook, you are seeing a selection bias of people who are out there to discuss these things, who are at the earliest stage in their life and who don't yet have the experience to actually make good on the potential that they have. So it's just the nature of the medium and not the nature necessarily of the power of the ideas of Kurtz. So
for me, I make money on the internet, and I have a certain personality that I promote. And those who know me face to face kind of laugh because it's just a little bit different than how I am, as you know me on Facebook. Although when we talk privately, of course, you know, in video, it's a bit different. But that's the thing. That's the thing. What I'm pointing to is so why build a movement, supposedly civil war in months, that is made up of men who are, or males, I should say, who are never going to take up weapons or anything. And so what does it all mean? That's my question to you.
Moritz.
Well, what's the value of saying anything at all? Like, isn't it the point to speak into existence a frame of reference that then can motivate people, that you don't need only to motivate people in the taking up arms way? Like, this is the thing, this is the problem that I have with Kurt. Like, I think that he is overemphasizing to the point of near exclusion a positiva, or something that can also pull people forward, or that can actually sort of release the pressure on the valve. I think he conceives basically of the current situation in the world as European civilization being in a pressure cooker of sort of assault from all sides, and that he wants to save his people, which I can understand, and that he wants to provide a credible enough threat to the people who are tightening the screws on the pressure cooker, so that they will like let up, and that the people that are in the pressure cooker can sort of exit it and sort of retake sovereignty over their own destiny. And I can agree with that sort of. It's a valuable idea. It's a powerful frame. There is a measure of truth to it. But what I don't like, and what it's not really coming, I don't think, out of my inexperience, or out of my pussyfooting, or out of my sort of not wanting to use force to defend my ideas or my way of life, but more out of I sort of see it in the sense of, when you create a credible threat, and exactly as Andy was describing earlier, when you sort of build up this powerful enemy in your frame, you're actually building him up, and you're also conceiving of people who are falling into that category that you identify as the enemy as an enemy. And so that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. There are other potential ways that if you were to reduce the stark contrast between you and what you identify as other, and you gave people who are engaging in parasitic and predatory behavior an out, even though you might enjoy just killing them, putting them on spires, hanging them from the trees, or whatever it is that you're saying you want to do with them, you might actually be more successful. So I don't know, I'm not on board with the whole negativa is everything. It actually, negativa is a special case or a subset of via realitas or via positiva in some sense, like there, or just via the way, right? Like, if you say via negativa, you're saying these are things I cannot do, or I won't do, or that you cannot do, or that you won't do if you want to stay around me. But doing as such, like acting at all, this is the problem that Kurt is always running into, that you, Andy, I think have also identified with. So this problem with value itself is that for any organism, which we are, to continue to exist, to survive, and not only survive, but perhaps even thrive, it has to acquire energy. In order to acquire energy, it has to act. So value is just what allows you to act in the furtherance of acquisition to survive, and then perhaps even to thrive. And then not even just for your own sake, but for the sake of the subsistence layers beneath you that actually gave rise to you, and that if you cut away at them, are going to deny you subsistence at some future point in time as well. So when you identify yourself as, when you identify your own interests as lying as to you, you're actually cutting yourself off from everything else in existence, and you're saying, this is the locus of my concern, this is the circle of my concern. And by only caring about this, you're actually disregarding all the things around this circle that are contributing to your ability to exist at all. And that's what I'm concerned with.
A lot of mine is
Andy, let me just interject just 1 minute with Moritz, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. But Moritz, that was really great how you put all of that. And the only thing I'd add is that, yes, you know, and we were talking about values, right? And so I kicked this off by saying, like, Kurt doesn't like value arguments. I'm like, what? You have to, you essentially have to argue value.
You do. There's no way around it.
There's no way around it, right? And so I loved how you put that. And the only thing I want to add is that absolutely, because you put really a scientific basic foundation on it, is that, yeah, you have to have energy and you have to pursue it, you know, and all of this, and you know, the lower animals, they have no choice. That's what they do, right? The human animal is the only one who has a choice whether to pursue values or not. You can default, die, you can actually kill yourself. So that's different. So what that means is that there is another layers of value for humanity. And that is our social values, our values as, you know, mates and families and extended families and all of this emotion. So emotion is a value too that we pursue.
Can I make a point on the emotion story? It ties very well into Kurt. To finish the Kurt topic, I think what happens is Kurt sees, this is a conjecture, I don't think this is true, I'm playing with this in my mind. I think that Kurt in some sense relates what I call zooming out or abstracting, or you know, zooming out of a topic and kind of getting more and more general, you know, pulling away, like almost what science tries to do, with almost a smarter mind and a better process for a more intellectual human being. And I think what he does is he's falling by his own method, because the method of science is the method of averages. Sorry, the method of much of social science is the method of averages. You know, men are on average stronger than women, on averages, and they are really useful, important tools. But you can't always. It's called inferring the particular from the general and the general from the particular. You can't always infer the particular from the general, because it's an obvious point. I'm not trying to make a Naxal argument. What I'm trying to say is relating it back to the zoom in and zoom out. So when I make an argument on Facebook, when Kurt makes a pronouncement, what I often do is I reply to it. And my reply is not to belittle him or my reply is basically a translation of his comments into 6 different languages. And I'll write 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs. People who don't know what the hell I'm doing will think it's word salad. But actually here's a section on I'll do it different each time, but here's a section on a view of it from an IQ 80 to 100. Here's a section of it from a view of a very, very masculine mind who doesn't deal with emotion. Here's a snippet of it from a very intellectual point of view. Here's a picture of it. Do you see what I mean? What I'm trying to do is communicate from lots of different areas. And what I found through this process of me doing is that Kurt absolutely despises whenever I bring an anecdote. So if I say to him, if I'm replying to his very complicated proprietarian argument, some of it's good, some of it's not, and I reply a long comment, and I say, oh, well, this is like the time when, and I explain a story. Now, what will happen is he thinks that all the people IQ of, you know, below 100 or below 105 will connect with that as a story, and that will be what teaches them.
Yes.
Now, that's true. Am I with you guys? Am I with you so far?
Yes. Oh, no. I think
so
that
let me finish.
It's like he doesn't like memes either.
Yeah, but no, let me finish, because I haven't made the point yet. I'm sorry that it's quite a hard point to make. It's quite difficult. Sometimes a point takes a while to make. So I think what he's done is he's sort of layering generalizations, which is a very smart thing to do when you're doing science and when you're trying to create tech. But it's when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with communication between minds that are so different. It's not like a computer sending data to a computer. It's like a fox trying to speak to a camel. You've got to realize that it's not. Sorry, I'll be clear here. He thinks that anecdotes are for less intelligent people and abstractions are for more. So his brain, I believe this, and again, I'm playing with this, I'm not sure. His brain is almost like the more abstract I can get. Whenever I see him praise someone, when he says, oh, John, you've really got it, or Bill, you've really got it. He's every single time, with a couple of exceptions, 93 to 96% of the time, he will be praising an abstractive process. And I think this is, at base, it's an error, okay? Because I have smarts or whatever, you have smarts, but I'm telling you, I've learned a hell of a lot more through anecdotal expression and emotion. That's when you were saying emotion. When you tell me a story and it sits in my head, like you told me about the American Spirit story and you told me about your wife. But anyway, we have these stories. Because that connected with my emotion.
Dude, we are still talking on the same page here. Go, continue. Right.
Yeah, so anyway, all I was trying to say is that I think just to get you guys to understand where Kurt's coming, I think if you can see him as someone who connects more and more and more with a sort of a distancing, because he sees that as sort of the science, he sees it as like the scientific aim. And I think in some sense it is, but you can't cross, and this will change topic quite well here. I want to see what Moritz had to say about this. You can't cross over dealing with people and dealing with objects, because one is like I'm not going to go into deeply why, because it's an essay topic, but in simple terms, when I say I zoom from in to out with people, and I zoom from out, so I zoom into people and I go information by information, I build it up.
Yeah.
But with objects, you take a generalization, you take another, you layer generalizations and you get a rule that's applicable in certain areas. You can't do that with people. It just doesn't work. So to change this slightly, I think it's quite obvious to me why Kurt is really quite good with abstractive and pictorial processes. He builds some really nice maps, some really good things. But as soon as you get him talking about basic emotions, basic values, submodal action cues, he will switch off. You want to see glazed eyes? Talk to Kurt about submodal action cues. He will be gone.
All right. Before you hand it over to Moritz, I want to do one tiny interjection here. And that is about your thing about analogies. And when I interjected, you're speaking my language there. And it absolutely, I've used them for so very long, and I promote the use of them because here's the thing. An analogy typically is from a person's experience. And it doesn't really even matter if they're relaying the experience like exactly true. In fact, sometimes they may even be tailoring it to you, but yet it is from their own experience. So I call it's an analogy, but I also call it an abstraction. And and that is what can make it very, very valuable. I pay attention. I pay very, very close attention to what I judge as really solemn, good human anecdotes. Not especially when it's not technical, when it's more,
Richard, what I would do also, if you have a desire to, I call it profile. I actually don't like the word profile, but consider people and things like that. I think you will get a lot back from trying to guess, for want of a better word, people's strengths. So you go, Andy, God, when I talk to you, I notice you do this and this. But actually, when you were trying to remember jack of all trades, you kind of bumbled for about 25 seconds and it was a bit interesting. And you notice what I do when I do that, and you kind of put it together, or whatever you're analyzing. And I think when you realize that people people are very similar to themselves and different to other people. That sounds so stupid, but people repeat things very, very often. And what I've noticed about, if you're trying to understand someone, we're all talking about, why is Kurt bringing together people who do nothing in the world, and this, and we're all trying to affect change. But to affect change, we need to communicate it with each other, come together, create norms, create a plan, and go forward with it, or something to that tune. And the integral part of that is the integration of two minds, one coder and one strategist, or one marketeer. You know what I mean? And to integrate those minds, you need those low barriers to entry. You need norms. You need to understand each other's life. All of these things. And key to that is to understand two things about people. I've said the first twice, which is understand what people pay attention to. I can talk to you about something you're not interested to, Richard, 4 times, and you will switch off every single one of those 4 times. Mm. It's just the way people are. And the second thing is really, really attune yourself to people's relative strengths. So if like Kurt is not a good communicator verbally, so Megan and I very early on, we said, if this is going to go viral, if this is going to be big, we need a new face, because we need someone else to be communicating this, because he will kill it dead. And so that's an example of where profiling is just so important. Why did I want you to host, Moritz and I? Because I believe that, I'm not going to tell you, but because I believe it was better for you to do it than I named 5 or 6 other people in my head. I thought, no, you're the guy, I want to do it. And I think, and this is a test, if it goes terribly, I was wrong and move on. And I think so to culminate in this profiling, what am I trying to get at? I'm trying to say, really pay attention to what other people pay attention to, most of all when their attention flows off, in conjunction with, never stop trying to expand your zeros and ones, or how do I describe it? Your ingredients of good, bad. So you say, okay, this person, okay, is he good verbally? Is he good? What does he do with this thing? And when I respond to this, does he? Is he sort of emotionally stable? Is she this? And the more ingredients, the more parallel. Think of a parallel in a series circuit. You want to get as parallel as possible. If you come across a problem, you don't want to go oof, you want to split it. You want to go, well, if yes, this, if no, this, like a program.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think that I'm just rabbiting this stuff out. And you can be thinking, yeah, that sort of makes sense. But forget it making sense or not. Just try it. When you let every single person you talk to, see, I had a conversation. I don't want to get on Megan here, but I had a conversation with Megan, and I pushed her out of her limit zone. I have to use this example because it's the only one I have at the moment.
You have to tell me in private message.
No. This is completely. It's not a private thing. So I was talking to her on FaceTime, and she'll be happy for me to share. And we were talking about her and her clients and how she deals with the clients. Nothing private. Mm-hmm. And she said sometimes she finds certain things hard to grasp and certain things. And I tried to introduce a paradigm to her, a process that I think would have helped her. And I think if she'd have realized that she could do this, it would have changed her life. But unfortunately, she didn't have the confidence in herself to believe she could do it, which is part of the problem. But so I said to her, imagine every conversation you're ever in with a single person to be 2 things. I'm not saying this is what I do. I'm saying this is what I think she should. I'm not even going to go into the explanation why, but if you're talking to a client, don't think of it as you talking to a client. Think of it as your client is in a world of understanding and questions for you, and you're in a world of considering that client. And consider almost everything in binary. Parallel it out. And I saw her face. She went. Her face changed. Her eyes kind of. Everything about her face said, "You are pushing me too far right now." And I think it's really important. If I hadn't seen that, if I hadn't observed, so I'm just finishing. If I hadn't observed that change in her, again, I don't want to make this about Megan, but if I hadn't observed that bafflement within her face, that total, like it was a face like this, like a face of just don't even take me down this road. So I pulled back and I prodded her with a little, and then after about 3 hours, I talked to her on the phone, a bit of message, I thought, this, Andy, was a bad test. Megan is not equipped to deal with this sort of thing. It doesn't mean she's stupid. It's just a limit that I've prodded, and I found a wall. And I think if you guys ever want to prod me for my limits, if you ever want to test, be a grandmaster, test my IQs, see what I would be welcome. I would absolutely love to be tested. There's nothing I like more than being tested. And so to comment on that, I'm just saying.
Oh, you're just bragging.
No. You know what I mean. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. So basically attention and strengths. Really look at test people's limits and test their attention.
I think what all of this is very useful for people who want to try to sort of be able to go away from a situation and then enter a new situation with more ability to deal with the situation than they had before. But really what you're doing is you're actually taking people's attention away from the situation right in front of them, and you're actually taking it to what the system, the schema, the structure that you're trying to force somebody into is. So that's very useful. That's the modern process of building up structures outside of ourselves that allow us to get a better handle on what is right in front of us and sort of see the causal chains at play. But ultimately, what you really want to get towards, I think, is pull all that complexity into yourself, let it inform your actions, and then don't reify it over and above the thing that's right in front of you, that's actually telling you much, 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 much more about reality than the structures and the strictures you have within you that are constraining your ability to interact with what is right in front of you. So the thing that I tend to, it's the same problem sort of with Kurt, I think, of, okay, building up all this intellectual machinery, building up all this structure, all this complexity to overcome a massive self-identified enemy and a massive sort of perceived threat. It's the same process that somebody goes through who sort of has been wounded as a child and been traumatized as a child, and then has to sort of overcome the wound by like building up their intellect to like win the rhetorical battle against their father or something. It's like, so if you do that, and if you don't gain awareness of the process by which you're engaging in that, and if you're not able to stop that, I mean, Kurt sometimes has this very telling sort of linguistic thing. He says, like, my autistic monster, like obsessing over something like that. So he has this idea of autistic monster.
Autism and Asperger's, I found, is a virtue signal amongst.
Richard, I'm on Richard's page with this. I agree with Richard. Go on.
Yeah. What I'm
We've
saying
talked about, so I think there's something to, one more thing. God, I could talk about Kurt all day because he's such an interesting guy, but one more thing on Kurt, which is, it's not so much on Kurt, but it's a thing I've noticed. And I think what I'm about to tell you is oversimplified and I'm overstretching it. So I'll just admit that, but it has something to it, which is, I think the autistic mind, partly because it can deal with complexity, but partly for other reasons, I think it has a tendency to oversimplify everything. And I think the what might be called the excessively feminine mind or the solipsistic mind has it's almost like autistic.
So it's very simple. It's very simple. We are a tensegrity structure, meaning we have tension and integrity within us. We are made up of bones, tendons, ligaments, batteries, basically. We hold tension within ourselves. We're able to store energy in ourselves to act on the impulses that are coming at us from environment, the signals, etc. And some people get yanked in every single direction that an impulse comes at them from. Some people are able to internalize the complexity of the signals around them and overcome the being yanked into different directions and are able to self-direct. And so the point is not to be the one who's yanked all the time. The point is not to be the one who's able to overcome every single signal. The point is to enter into a functional relationship with with reality, if you want to, and to persist the process of life itself. I think that's sort of the ultimate goal. Like, I don't think you can really get out of that frame. And if you try to sort of say, like, my goal is just to do this, or if you identify the locus of your concern as very narrow, you're just betraying that you're not able to see further than that. And so this is the problem that I have with people who sort of identify the circle of concern as very narrow, as being sort of only along racial lines or only along cultural lines or only along like IQ lines or whatever. You're just not seeing the full picture, and you're just showing that you haven't figured out how to set yourself in proper relationship to those kind of things that you're actually making the other. So this is the problem that I constantly have with people when they come up against something that is an object.
Andy and I talked about this somewhat the other night. I think it's what kicked us off into talking about, everybody wants to make, categories and labels, right? You're this, you're that, you're this range of IQ, you're this range of IQ, you're alpha, you're beta, you're this, you're an alcoholic, you're all of these labels that help us, that basically help us, or people, I should say, to not have to work too hard to figure someone out, right? It's like, okay, all right, they're this label, got them figured out, in the box, they're in the box. Does that sound right?
Okay, so from my side, I like to look at these things in two ways. I like to split. See, I keep going on about series and parallel circuits, but like what Moritz was saying, it's almost like when you make that choice to come out of your cone or your shape, you're almost creating a parallel. You know, you pull someone out of their obsessive feminism or whatever, and to drag them out of that, you're creating a whole new world. And I think to come full circle in terms of what we've been talking about, I had an idea of this. I've been thinking about this for a while, which is, you know, in social circles, sometimes people say, oh, he or she talks about themselves too much and this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been wondering, I'm thinking, why do people say that? And what's this, you know, do I talk about myself? And I thought actually in some sense it's the other way around. And I wanted to test that in the last few minutes here, which is to say, fair enough, let's talk abstractly, how we want to improve, let's turn it around. We're all very good at that. We're all quite mastered. But actually going back to tropoclastics and my first question, which is teach through explaining our own experiences by saying, if I say Moritz and Richard together and separately, what have you been working on in your life in a tropoclastic manner? Or what are you looking to say, I think this process may or may not be working for these reasons. I'm going to try this and I'll let you know. Or I'm on the third month of this process here. And I think those anecdotes, so you call them, you call it an abstraction. I call it an anecdote. You were saying it's a story of that you learn from that. I believe you learn from that so much more about the person and about how that person integrates. So my question is, what have you guys been working on, or what are you hoping to work on as a process or as a shape that will hopefully improve or get you to your aim?
Can I go first? Can I go first?
Yeah.
Andy? All right. Okay. It's very interesting. So this gets a little bit personal. In January of 2018, so it's a year and a half now, my wife and I separated. It's a simple story. We'd been married for 18 years. She retired as a 35-year-old awesome school teacher of 5th and 6th graders and a counselor. She has a master's in counseling. She counseled the junior high kids. The story she tells, crazy, right? And but anyway, she finally retired after 35 years, and we relocated up to our what was our second home up here in the mountains, where I am right now, that we'd had for 15 years, and we just found that 24/7, 365 just didn't work for us, right? It was better when we were like doing our things, and then we were here. We don't have kids, and so that set off a thing. And so I, it took the divorce process took a year. It's very amicable. I mean, we talk to each other almost every day on the phone. And we have dogs, and we share the dogs. And anyway, so I have been on the internet since 2000, since very early 90s, but then only like doing something like a blog since 2003, 4,700 posts and counting since 2003. At a point, it was at one a day, just myself and everything, blah, 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 right? But I started making money off of it in 2008. Not huge, but it's like, it pays pretty good for like a hobby. And so, but here's what's hilarious is, and I had started to build up things. I had other channels of income and everything, cryptocurrency, Patreon, different things. I was making like $3,000 a month in 5 months. In Patreon for crypto, I got it up to $3,000 a month income, and in 5 months. And then the wife and I separate. I lost interest in all of it. And I've never really been able to get it back except for Facebook things. So the question is, I'm sorry to take so long. The question is, what do I want to do? It's like, I am tired of the info space. I grew up in construction. My dad was a construction guy. My grandfather was a sign painter. He painted all the signs for the Reno casinos when I was growing up, and it's all fit. We hunted, we're fishing, we're doing all this stuff, right? And at 58, that's what I want to go back to. So as soon as I sell my house, I'm going nomad. I'm going to build out RV campers on the Euro style vans, actually.
Nice.
The big tall Euro style vans, make them into RVs. Yeah, I've got it all nailed. I have all the plans and everything, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to go travel the southern United States. I'm going to find a piece of property I can subdivide, and I'm going to start building shipping container homes. If you've ever seen the shipping container homes, like they're 40-foot shipping containers, put them like Legos, and you make a home. They're fully structural. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go.
Are you going to sell your place that you're living in now, or not?
Oh, it's on the market right now. It's already on the market. Yeah.
And what's the general?
$432,000 if you're interested.
Sorry, say it again.
432,000, fully furnished.
Will you take 420?
What?
Will you take 420?
I will.
Brilliant. So in terms of, what I'm hearing from you there, to be very Kathy Newman. So what you mean to say is,
so what you're saying
you've lived a life very much at the computer, in the last few years, and very much kind of tied to the computer, and your wife or ex-wife, and that life has now changed by so many ingredients, that the computer-based bit and the blogging and all that, you sort of, I don't get the impression from your face that I think a part of you knows that you'll always have a tie to that. So even if you're not as buzzed about that now, you will do. Am I right?
Absolutely. No, but I will only do it. When it's like, and Facebook is a thing, but I've not been, you can go to freetheanimal.com. Like I said, 4,700 posts, but not so many in the last year or so, because it was like, but before I had such a passion. Every day I would get up and I would be like, I'd have to find something to write a blog post about. It's like, and I'm a guy who always says that love and hate are two sides of the same coin of passion. It's indifference indifference is death.
Yeah, that. I agree. Let's just put it that way. I agree. Moritz, what about you? What are you working on at the moment in terms of changing your behavior?
Hard to define it into a single little thing, but let's just say that I'm working on, I just did a little count recently of how many companies I'm working with, or how many sort of efforts or ventures. And let's just say it is quite the list. 1 second. 48 companies and counting. And so if you're talking tropoplastics and change, then it's very much changing. So what that means is that the change is so large and so dynamic and so momentous that I virtually cannot sort of look beyond the singularity point that is sort of every point along the way, because everything is so much in flow. But if I were to break it down to some major strands, it's basically building up my own financial self-sustenance, so that I can generate income for myself independently of any of the companies that I work with. So to be completely sort of sovereign over my own time, and through that then gain even more freedom to pick even more who I want to work with most, although I'm already doing that anyway, and to fund the travel and the or to fund others and to invest into the relationships, the projects, the products, the companies that I think are relevant on the global stage. And so far I've only played intellectual venture capitalist. I think that'll change pretty soon into sort of real financial capitalist as well. But yeah, that's sort of what I'm doing right now. I'm in San Francisco because there's lots of interesting stuff happening here. I'm going to meet a couple people later. I've already met in the 2 days I've been here, I don't know, 10 different people that are all interested and involved in very interesting things. And I just set up a game night next week that I'm going to perform as game master of. I am thinking of setting up a psychedelic performance piece at a comedy club soon. Like the list just goes on and on and on. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Can I just make a comment? Because I comment on the comments of the people. You know, it's sort of what I do, like the process. So what I just asked you both, this is to teach you about yourself. I just asked you both, what are you doing in your lives to change the processes you're doing to improve your life or to whatever? And Richard gave me the response of, this is what I've been doing, which is a perfectly good introduction. And I'm going to go on this journey. And then you gave me the response of, this is what I'm doing. And you answered the question by saying, I want to become financially independent, give or take. That was the only slice of either of your answers which actually answered my question. And I'm not being a dick. I'm actually saying the reason why I brought up the question is not to find out the answer from you. That's for the audience. The reason why I brought up the question is selfishly so I can tickle your elephant, as I call it. I can get part of your subconscious thinking about the idea of, hold on a minute, he wasn't asking me what my dreams are for the next 2 years. He's not asking me what I do every day. He's asking me, what is it that I did in XYZ way and I'm now doing in ZXY way? And neither of you answered the question. So I don't need an answer. I just want you to maybe go away and think about the processes you could do that could improve things. And the thing is, a lot of those processes will be absolute crap.
Let's try, Andy. Let's try, Andy, morally narrating what's happening here and like gaining sovereignty over our lives. Very nice.
Oh, you know, I'm joking, but at the same time,
yeah. What a dick! What a dick!
No. And here's what I want to say to that. I tell you what I just told you because it would sort of be pointless to go on this huge diatribe of the ways that things are currently now that they were not just recently, because the rate of change is so high that I would just be identifying a very small part of something that doesn't explain the full picture. So,
you know what? Do you know what I'd have said, Moritz? I would have said something like, this is an example of an answer. Maybe I used to, I don't know, go to bed after a few drinks and wake up whenever I did. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock and I'm not using my computer an hour before bed and I'm setting my alarm for 6. And I'm hoping that process will marry with my reading of the book of Why We Sleep. And
okay,
we'll see
here's my answer to you. Here's my answer to you. Because I'm on the road and because my environment changes virtually every single day multiple times, and because I cannot rely on stability outside of myself and I have to pull the stability into myself, there is nothing that is constant enough in my life other than myself that I have under my control that I could sort of anchor things against. And so virtually all of the complexity of my life and all the stability is within me. And so it's just the being thing that is constantly changing. And that is constantly stable and changing. So it's very hard for me to identify, okay, I go to bed every night at this, because I don't. It's not, I meet this guy every other Tuesday. No, I don't. So there's nothing that I can really say to that other than my being is changing constantly. My habits are working, but the habits are sort of on such a minute scale that it's not really, like, the flow is just too, like, it's like singularity point to singularity point. I cannot see beyond the singularity points forward. And if I just took one singularity point behind me, I would be sort of cutting away complexity of all the other ones that are also as determinative of everything as this one.
Okay, what you just said there taught everyone a huge amount about you, and that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, hey, since I am actually the official host here, let's use this to to close up, because I think everybody is a bit tired. But I should say that we have to collaborate, maybe formally a little bit online about perhaps making a bit of a series of this. I don't know, once a week or once every 2 weeks in a thing where we all get together, but we take a specific topic and we do it like really judiciously, because I'm hoping that people look at our mutual banter and say like, what the fuck? Right. So, but anyway, I wanted to say one last thing, and that is that, I like when Andy psychologically, or what is it? Psychoanalysis. What is it? Profiling. Whatever you call it. I kind of like it. Right.
I want a better word. If you guys can find a better word than profile, I'll use it, because I don't like the word profile.
No, I really like it. I have a very thick skin, so he can even go farther. Maybe he can guess how many times I masturbate a day or something like that. Who knows? Right? So, but I really no. I'm not intimidated by that whatsoever. And that is, I've been around. I'm secure, but I don't mind a guy. I don't mind someone like him, and he's obviously hugely intelligent, hugely smart, and I don't mind at all like him trying to parlor trick me with his like psychoanalysis. But I actually here's the thing. You can call it a parlor trick as much as you want, but who knows? Maybe there's some validity to it, and you got to think about it. And that's it. I think that's his point. It's like, think about this, right? Now, I don't know. Maybe I'll profile him next time we're online. All right, you two want to say goodbye?
Yeah, Moritz, thank you so much for your time. Really good chatting with you. And yeah, I still think the way you describe stuff is so funny. The way your eyes go, I'm noticing where I've overvalued our similarities, but it's definitely interesting to me talking to you. And I think I'd love to talk again soon. And Richard, I've got a lot to say to you. I think your little turns of phrases irk me very, very slightly. Like and I mean this in the best possible way. You see your thick skin, so you don't take offense. Well, like when you said you were sure I hadn't beaten the Grandmaster, and then now you just said that your parlor tricks. So I know you were joking, but it's like, it's almost the exact opposite of a parlor trick. It's like feedback. It's close to the opposite. So we can talk about that later. But yeah, I really appreciate the way you have listened to both of Moritz and I, and you've kind of integrated what we're talking about. And actually, I think my conjecture was right. I think you're a good host, and I'm really happy to have been here, and I'd like to do it again.
Thank you, man. Moritz, I should say.
What?
Go ahead, say goodbye.
Oh, say goodbye.
Yeah.
Bye.
We have to end this.
Ciao.
We'll just do it again sometime. But we have to talk about doing like maybe specific things. Okay,
so right? Yeah, I mean, we can do this. We can make it a series for sure. You can play with it. You can make it maybe a series on your blog that you can, I don't know, have people support you or whatever. If you want to combine the sort of thing that you were talking about, like continuing to make money, or whether maybe you don't want to do that at all. That's fine by me too. Whatever you want to take this, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything to ask of people. I don't have anything really to tell people other than what I wrote into the chat. That might be instructive, and that might give people a measure of sort of, not hope, but like faith that they can act in furtherance of their own goals, even when their table stakes don't seem to be so high, which is that I'm in the presence of somebody whose IQ is what, 175? What did you say, Andy?
172 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, and
I have to interject, because I saw you put that in your 133, right, Maurice? So, and I don't, since I was young, I always test between 134 and 147, and in later years, I Q-test drinking whiskey. I do. I absolutely do. But I still test in the range of 130, 134 to 147.
Richard, let me interject, because you like the word interject. I did my law degree drunk. I thought it'd be a really good idea to do my maths A-level on ecstasy. God, I shouldn't be saying this, should I? And my law degree drunk. It's not a good idea. I didn't get a first in my law degree because you can't get a first drunk. It doesn't work.
No.
Anyway, I shouldn't. Yeah, there we go.
I used to here's an anecdote. My junior year in college is in my junior year.
Guys,
spring
I want to close this, and I brought up the point to make a point, but I didn't get to the point because we're already 10 minutes past when I wanted to drop off. But I brought that up because even though the particular measure that we are identifying here as being worthwhile mentioning seems to be, for me, lower in some way, and quite measurably. Like, I mean, that's quite the difference. Like 40 points out of 170 or 130. It's like that's
2 2/3 standard deviations. 2 points.
That's massive. And so that's like a qualitative step or several orders of magnitude along some dimension. And so, how am I able still to do like work with 48 companies? How am I like at 26 already like traveling the globe and doing all these things that seem so impressive and the grass is green on the other side kind of thing? Like I'm able to do this, I think, because I have the right orientation.
Exactly.
And I pay attention. I pay very close attention to the things within myself and within others that I don't really do profiling in that sense, but I do pay attention to when somebody is acting from a higher part of themselves or when they're acting from a lower part of themselves. And also I do that within me. And so by continuously steering myself into the direction of where I don't yet know how to integrate what I'm sitting in the presence of, I am actually becoming more of what is, because I am able to interface with more of reality by staying tuned to the leak in the abstractions, because every single structure has a leak, and as watertight as you want to make it, you're never going to get to encapsulate the all. And so the reason why I'm able to do what I'm able to do is that I know and I practice my life in a way that I don't collapse complexity into the structure that I currently have within me. And so by keeping a basic receptivity, staying open to being informed by the environment, being formed by the environment, I am able to grow to become more of it. And so what you're looking at here is just a part of what I am. Like this body is not the end of my being in a sense. I exist within you to some degree. I exist in the people that I interact with to some degree. I exist through the tools that I use that amend my sort of cybernetic functioning. Like I have here extended ears that are allowing me to listen to things that I would otherwise not be able to do. So I am like an extended man, an X-man in that sense. And we all are. If you wear glasses, you are. It's just, are you able to extend that extension further and further and further and further out and make yourself more of reality? And I think 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago or something.
Okay. Hey,
once I'll finish this off.
All right.
I wrote a post when I first started, when I sort of was just starting to get into the proprietarian conversation on Facebook. And I said that free will is a sort of, free will versus determinism is the wrong frame. It is actually like, you don't go against nature when you have free will, but you become more of it. Mm-hmm. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think that's a good place to start from next time. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah. So look, because here's the thing. Let's all agree that we're three pretty fucking smart dudes, right? It will bore. It's gonna bore pretty much everyone except Megan, I think, because she loves you. So she's gonna be the one. She's gonna be the single view, right? And you two can informer of it once I get it up on YouTube.
Oh, I've got some people. I know some people who want to watch this. You better send it to me.
No. I'm going to put it up on YouTube. I'm just joking, right? And in fact, the way you went off on Megan, I wanted to say something like that, but I'm going to save it for later, maybe privately. And it's still not nefarious. It's just like you did. And let's just acknowledge it's because of her we're here, the three of us, right?
On that note, guys, thanks very much. I'm going to head to bed.
Yes. And so we're going to do it again. Maybe we'll structure it better. This was just a total free for all, first time and everything. And if you like how the three of us banter together, and maybe we can get better at it, how we go in and out and whatever. This was just like a serendipitous test. We put this together in an hour on Messenger. We said let's
free expression.
Right? All right. I love you guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's see recording. How do I stop this?